extraordinaire, the gemologist.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geomologist Presents. Amy and I are back. Say hi, Amy,
Hello.
to talk about the next movie in our series of top 10 Westerns according to IMBD ratings. Today's movie we're going to review is High Noon from 1952, directed by Fred Zimmerman from a screenplay by Carl Foreman. And this movie is based on the short story The Tin Star by John W. Cunningham, written in 1947 for Collier's. And this movie is currently streaming on Paramount. But first, we got some feedback, Amy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we got some feedback from a couple people. So I'm going to share their feedback and then we can respond to their questions. Is that cool?
That's cool.
All right. So the first up is Joe Decahedron of the Decahedron RPG podcast.
Hi, Carl. This is Joe Gill from the Decahedron RPG podcast. I just heard your episode with Amy with your review for The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Great episode, really great episode. And coincidentally enough, my most recent episode, although maybe by the time you get this, it will be the one before that, was me sitting down with Valerie, my wife, and us talking about the 22, 23 or so movies that we saw in the theater during 2023. So I guess there's something in the air about movie reviews this month. Anyway, Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Yeah, actually, I consider this a noir film. Not everybody does, but I think even when Jason was doing that film noir series last year before, I called in and I mentioned this as one of my favorite noirs because noir, what makes a film noir is that concentration on a vice, on a human vice. In The Postman Always Rings Twice, it's lust, and Double Indemnity, it's lust and greed, right? It's all those things. And the fact that you can just feel the Hays Code running through the whole thing, just like you can in Treasure of the Sierra Madre. But yeah, a couple of years ago, Phantom Events, that's this company that does special screenings of stuff, but they do it at the theaters all across the states. They had a showing of Treasure of the Sierra Madre at the theater. So we actually saw it on the big screen and we loved it. And yeah, I agreed with just about everything you said. So yeah, great episode. Thanks a lot for that and keep up the great work.
Okay. Before we get into the next call, we can field this call. So, Amy, yeah, I think that's great. Joe, go ahead. I'll let you respond first, and then I'll throw in my 2 cents.
Well, first of all, I have to say kudos for doing it with your wife. I
Yeah.
think that's pretty exciting. Go to see movies together. We watch movies together. It's spending time, and that's awesome. But to dive back into the older films, which I love, and to do it together, it's great. I really think it's incredible. And I appreciate what he said about noir films. And I appreciate the fact that they also captured that excitement that we found with the different music and the lighting and how it kept getting darker. So that was great.
Yeah, I mean, awesome. I think it's awesome that you and your wife went to go see 22 films in the theater. We saw a lot of streaming stuff this year. I think the highlight of this year, 2023, that is the past year, this year being 2024, is that we watched all the Bond films. I thought that
Mhm.
was cool. And we made our way through the original series for Star Trek, which was
Yes.
pretty fun and very interesting. Just seeing the progression of the Bond films from the 60s to the aughts and then or actually now the 2010s, right?
Oh,
2020s.
yeah.
And then the how sci-fi was back in the 60s. I still believe Star Trek was groundbreaking, some really cool stuff, a lot of fun tropes that we see as like memes or homage and other things.
Mhm.
But it's great that you guys actually went to the theater, something to strive for, I think. Now, and as far as yeah, it is categorized as a Western. Even though it takes place in the 1920s, but maybe it is film noir is probably the best uh, characterization of it. It's got Bogart, who's in several of those types of films. during back in the day. So yeah, I do agree that it is film noir, and maybe that's why Call of Cthulhu. I don't know. I know someone like Jason Connerly would probably know what film noir RPG. I think he actually had me buy one. There's like a film noir RPG from an independent company that he didn't make me buy one. He suggested it strongly, and it sounded like a great deal that could fit that genre. But that's why I think Cthulhu fits because it's like that psychological thriller, psychological horror. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. So on to the next call, and this one is from Joe Richter of Hindsightless.
That was a really fun movie review that you did with Amy. That the two of you guys just bounce off of each other so well. I really enjoyed listening to it. I, as many times as I've heard the phrase, the quote from that movie about the stinking badges, I'd never actually seen the movie, and I couldn't have told you where that quote came from before listening. So thank you for that. And it's also a case of one of those false memories, Mandela effect type things. Because I've always thought of the quote was, "We don't need no stinking badges," but I don't think that's what it is. I think it was a little different when I actually heard the quote the first time. So it's just one of those things where you think you know something, and then you're like, "Oh, that's not how it goes at all." I liked Amy's choice for Call of Cthulhu for that movie. Yeah, like she mentioned, it fits. It's already in the 1920s, so you don't even have to mess around with the time or anything. And yeah, I thought it was really cool. I'm excited to hear the rest of y'all's movies. So take it easy, you two. I hope you're having a good 2024. And yeah, we'll talk soon. Peace out.
Okay, that was from, like I said, Joe Richter of Hindsightless. What do you think, Amy?
Oh, I appreciate his phone call. There's so many old movies that you can watch that people use the idioms from or the phrases, and you just don't know where they come from. And then you'll be watching the movie for the first time and you'll be like, that's where it came from. I
Right,
can't believe I didn't know that, except there was no possible way for us to know that.
right,
But
right. I mean, I don't recall even seeing it. So like I mentioned in our podcast of Treasures, I thought this came from Blazing Saddles when in fact it is a callback to Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which is awesome. Gold Hat's whole line about not being part of the Federales and then stinking badges. So I thought that was great. And I thank you so much, Joe, for saying that Amy and I work well together. I would hope so, having been married as long as we have.
yes.
So I'm glad you're listening to our series and uh, now on with it. Thank you both Joes. I know so many Joes, it's not even funny. But thank you, Joe and Joe, for your calls. And we hope to get more feedback as we progress in this series. So back to High Noon.
Oh, yes. I enjoyed High Noon.
Yeah, I do too. It's another black and white film that I was like, another black and white film. I don't know
I
why.
mean, it converts you to a black and white film watcher at this rate.
Right. That's maybe true, but a 1952 black and white film, even though they had Technicolor, they decided to go black and white. I actually think I saw something, a blurb about there being budget restrictions. But in any case, I did like the film. I like a couple things that really stood out about the film. For me, just initial impressions, and of course, we're going to go into awards and cast and all that, and the plot. But I thought what was really awesome is the plot occurs in real time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you get at the beginning, you get, oh, the train's coming at, noon and an hour to noon. And then it's an hour and a half, the movie. So all the action happens in the last sort of half hour. Well, there's action before that, but the action, the main part, the climax that takes place in the last half hour. So I thought that was really cool. So yeah, you want, I'll go into the cast and then you talk about awards, Amy. Is that how we want to do it?
Sure.
All right, so this has a lot of people that you probably have recognized or heard of before. Starring in the main role as Marshall Kane is Gary Cooper, and right, so he's Marshall Kane. Thomas Mitchell is the mayor, Mayor Jonas Henderson. You have Lloyd Bridges making an appearance here, not in a funny slapstick role like we know him for Alien, not Alien. We know him for Airplane, and he's Deputy Marshal Harvey Pell. A fantastic performance by Katie Jurado as Helen Ramirez, and Grace Kelly is in this as Marshall Kane's wife, Amy Fowler Kane. I think interesting. I don't see if there's any other. There's quite a few other people that you might know. Lon Chaney Jr. is Martin Howe, the former marshal. Harry Morgan is in there as Sam Fuller, so Harry Morgan from MASH. So Ian McDonald. So a lot of these are like actors that you've seen in a lot of things. Ian McDonald, Otto Kruger, Harry Shannon, Lee Van Cleef is one of the bad guys. It's Jack Colby, one of the main bad guys. Frank Miller's one of Frank Miller's bad guys. Robert J. Wilk and Sheb Woolley. Let me see if there's any strange uncredited that we have, because we sometimes either uncredited or they're given their the name that they don't go by in modern times. So, but I don't really recognize anyone. Do you recognize anyone or any that stood out to you?
No, not well. I mean, not outside of the ones that you've already mentioned. I love the genre that's prior to the 60s. It seems so very innocent. So a lot of those names are familiar to me, but may not be familiar to our listeners.
Right. That's why I kind of try to highlight the ones that, like Lloyd Bridges and a role that he's not, high on the sniffing glue. So
he's definitely not stopping sniffing super glue this time.
Right. Yeah. So so this movie did win some awards.
It won many Academy Awards. In 1953, it won Best Picture for Stanley Kramer. It won Best Actor in a Leading Role for Gary Cooper, obviously. Fred Zimmerman for Best Director. Carl Foreman for Best Writing for the Screenplay. Elma Williams and Harry Gersted for, and I apologize if I mispronounce these names, for Best Film Editing. Then that's followed up with Best Music for the original song. I don't know anybody that doesn't know the song from High Noon. And Best Music Scoring for Dramatic or Cinematic Movie, which is ironic because they were very groundbreaking in what they were doing.
Yeah, we'll get to the music in a bit. So I thought also was interesting is Katie Jurado as Helen Ramirez. She won some awards as well for the movie. She's mainly in a lot of Mexican films. And I thought I appreciated it was very groundbreaking, much like I enjoyed. I really felt that even like Treasure of Sierra Madre also for the time was pretty progressive, a lot of Spanish speaking actors in that movie. And they weren't, to me, they weren't stereotyped. So I thought that was pretty cool. And definitely the character Helen Ramirez was not stereotyped. She's won, right. So she definitely has won stuff here. She actually has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and she was honored in 1992 with the Golden Boot Award for her contributions to the Western genre. And actually Juan Gabriela, a Mexican singer-songwriter, wrote a song about her. So that's kind of cool. All right.
Neat.
Yeah, so I thought it was really good. I don't know if there's
I'd like to point out that in all these years, nobody's really tried to make a remake of High Noon.
Yeah, I guess you want to talk about that controversy now, or?
Well, not necessarily the controversy. Did you know in 1980, CBS aired a TV series called High Noon Part 2, The Return of Will Kane?
Huh.
It was pretty interesting. 1981, the Brits across the pond had Outland, basically the same idea, but that one actually starred Sean Connery.
Right.
I forgot to mention it was Lee Majors and Catherine Kennan in the CBS one, and then you have Sean Connery, Peter Boyle, and Francis Shanahan in Outland.
Right.
And then as recently as 2000, Stanley Kramer's widow produced a remake of High Noon for a TV movie for TBS that had Tom Skerritt in it and Michael Madison.
Yeah.
I don't ever remember that coming out, but as a movie, it's never been remade. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And again, I think it is considered an early example of like a revisionist Western because it kind of changed the idea of the typical Western, which was strong male character leading the civilized against the uncivilized. But in this case, right, it's Cain against the bad guys.
I would say more than just that. I would say it's Cain against himself, Cain against the bad guys, and Cain against the entire town. If you
Right.
think about it,
Right.
I would
Yeah.
say the whole moral of the story is standing up to do the right thing when no one else will do it with you. What kind of a man are you in the mirror? That type of thing.
Yeah, just some other points too about that. And we don't have to get into the controversy. You can look it up. You could just probably Google controversy
For
of
High
High
Noon.
Noon.
Yeah.
But I guess part of that controversy is that John Wayne didn't like it. He said it was un-American. And also there's this Polish political poster with Gary Cooper and the word solidarity in the back. So I guess it was, it was influence solidarity, which I think is good. A stand against, ironically, if you look up the controversy and look in detail, it's kind of ironic. Stand against communism that solidarity was in Poland at the time, and they choose High Noon as part of their propaganda. So it's a pretty cool stuff, I think. All right.
What I think is even more funny about that is the controversy had absolutely nothing to do with the movie. He was standing alone in the movie, but it was never his desire to.
Right. Yeah. We'll get into that as part of the plot, right? So it's pretty cool. So, so let's get into it. We start in Hadleyville, which is, I guess, apparently in New Mexico territory, and we show like the wedding between Amy Fowler, so Grace Kelly's character, and Will Kane, and he's about to retire. They're going to leave, and then word arrives that Frank Miller, a man and a vicious outlaw who Kane sent to prison, he's going to be released, and he's going to get there at noon, one day ahead of the new marshal. And also, like the opening scene, I thought was pretty cool because it's not even Gary Cooper in the opening scene. Actually, we have to step back a little bit during the credit scenes. Like all these old 50s movies had the not like bullet credits, but that big spread of credits and the really large title across the screen that they imprint on the film. And his buddies, or his gang, arrives, Miller's gang. His younger brother Ben, Jack Colby, and Jim Pierce, they await at the train station very ominously.
It is. I'd like to point out in that opening scene, I think you see your first clock with the hands an hour ahead.
Right. And every scene shows a clock. I think that's brilliant. What they did is every scene shows a clock. So like I said, this movie is in real time. And I know when we get into it, when we talk about the RPG, how you do an RPG, I think that's pretty a fascinating mechanic, that one could use. We'll maybe get into that a little later. Maybe I'm giving things away, but I think it's amazing that they showed that. So how much time is ticking. It adds to the tension. It definitely impressive use. I think like a lot of bright light. When they show the wedding and the happiness of that wedding, and everyone loves Kane, and then when they show more grim and gritty and a lot of shadows when the outlaws are waiting at the train station, I think it's pretty cool.
I'd also like to point out that the music somewhat changes too. So it's light and airy to begin with, and then the musical score, it's like it's marching to a battle almost. So it starts off kind of slow, and then it builds in the tension. So I honestly believe the movie wouldn't leave you as tense and on the edge if you didn't have that pounding music and the ticking of the clocks and the lighting. Right.
For sure. And I think what's interesting, so with that music that gets more and more ominous as you go from very happy, the happy 50s music with its, a lot of brass and all that kind of stuff, to more strings as time goes on. It's also, there's a refrain of the ballad of Will Kane all throughout, right? The whistling and the part of that song that goes all throughout. And they sing some of the lyrics here and there, but they don't sing the whole thing throughout the movie. You don't get the last line, the punchline of the song until the end, so I think that's kind of neat. As much as at some points that refrain annoys me, I think at the end, I think it really works. It really works.
It does, because I mean, anytime you're tense about something and you hear those notes from High Noon, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that fits my mood. And there's certain pieces of music that do that to you.
Mhm.
And this is one. So, I mean, it's so well played out. Obviously, I'm not the only one that feels that way. They won an Academy Award for it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, if nothing else, if you don't want to watch the movie, pick up the soundtrack, because I think if you were to play that while playing an RPG, you can build tension in your role-playing games with it as well. Just a side note.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's a great idea, actually. So Miller decides to stay, and this is contrary to what his wife, Amy Fowler Kane, I guess, who is a devout Quaker and pacifist. We learned that's Grace Kelly's character. And the solution is simple. She's encouraging Miller to leave before the train gets there. But Kane has a sense of duty and honor. He wants to do the right thing. And he also adds to that, well, he would be hunted down anyway. So then Amy gives him an ultimatum. What do you think of that ultimatum, Amy, that she's going to leave on the noon train with or without him?
Well, first of all, her now husband is the one that put him in jail in the first place. So that's why she doesn't want him to stay. But secondly, I've learned over the years, you give any man an ultimatum and they'll do the exact opposite. So
Yeah, that's kind of what we
I think
do.
that was a bad idea on your wedding day to give your new husband an ultimatum. It's not as if she didn't know what he was and who he was to begin with. But I mean, that's adding to the tension too for him. So now he has duty and honor, and then he's got his new wife, and then he's got, well, I can teach the town to defend themselves. And I mean, it's just added stress on him.
Yeah, yeah. So then he starts going around, and most of the movie is taken up by Kane visiting old friends and allies, but none of them will help. And in fact, Judge Perry Mederick, he's like, I'm out of here. I'm taking off. He's gonna flee the town. Because he's kind of, I guess he's afraid of retaliation because he was a judge that put old Frank Miller in jail. So he's leaving town, and then during this we kind of meet Lloyd Bridges' character, Harvey Pell. He is Kane's young deputy, and he's bitter at Kane because Kane apparently did not recommend him as a successor. He says he will stand with Kane, but only if Kane changes his mind, right? To put a good word for him. And Kane, of course, this is part and parcel to Kane's character, and a theme throughout the city is like, we're not cutting corners. I'm going to do the right thing. And he says, no, I'm not going to give in. So Pell's like, gives his badge and pistol and kind of undermines Kane's effort to round up a posse. Right. So
I think my favorite funny non-mentioned character in this is the guy that's sleeping in the jail cell, sleeping off his stupor.
yeah, it's hangover.
He's completely oblivious of what's going on. And so Kane just writes a note, be back in 5 minutes, and puts it on the front of the door and leaves him.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
It's just
there is a little humor, and I think that kind of serves to kind of break the tension a little bit. It's a definitely serious and deadly situation, but I kind of like that kind of writing. It puts sometimes there is humor in a serious situation, and anyway, yeah. So Pell refuses. Kane tries to round up a posse at the saloon, but like everyone is like, oh, what, all this cool stuff's going to happen when Frank Miller, and even though Frank Miller was a really bad guy and he used to beat people up and kill people with impunity, and generally treat people badly, he's a big scoundrel, but it was fun, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Some people in the saloon are pro Miller, right? And they're also, unwilling to join Kane. He goes to church, and then he's met with fear. People are worried that a gunfight's going to damage the town and their reputation. People might get killed. There's even like one guy who I guess has helped him in the past. He goes to his house. I don't remember that character's name. Do you, Amy?
I don't remember his exact name, but he had his
Oh,
wife
that was-
answer the door and say that he's in church.
Right. That was here it is. That was Harry Morgan's character, Sam Fuller. Is that right? Sam Fuller.
I think so.
And Sam was, I guess, an old friend of his, and his wife says he's not here, and then he tries to, and they feel bad, but then they don't step up, and I think that's a big thing.
I think that's a huge thing. And I think that as we're rewatching these old movies, they have these ideas in the background to challenge yourself. Like Treasures of the Sierra Madre was talking an awful lot about greed and how one handles that. And this one, I think, deals a lot with how do you handle your own fear when no one else will stand up with you.
Right.
He's, in my opinion, a lot more courageous, not because he was willing to kill someone, not because he was willing to give up his life, but because in the face of all of this that was going on, he had so many easy ways to leave the situation, but he took the hard way.
Yeah.
Shows his true character, I think.
Right. So a lot, like I said, a lot of the movie is taken up by Kane walking around and asking people. Like we said, Sam Fuller hides in his house. One guy does offer to help, but he's blind, and Kane doesn't want, I guess a good man. He doesn't want him to die needlessly and get killed easily, apparently. And then
there was the kid that volunteered too.
Yeah, the kid volunteered, and Kane admires the courage, but doesn't want him to also get killed in the line of fire. And then the guy who he's deputized actually backs out when he realizes he's the only one that's going to help.
Oh yeah, he went to his girlfriend's apartment in the hotel to have lunch and hang out and talk to her about how he's insane and should just leave. And I think they were insinuating that she was also with Gary Cooper's character originally.
Right. Yeah.
But I didn't quite catch what all she owned, but she owned quite a few businesses in that town.
Yeah, I think she owned the hotel, right? So
the hotel and I think the bar.
Right. So there's a really, so she's definitely a businesswoman, something very rare in the Old West. And there's an interesting confrontation during the movie between Amy now Kane, and Helen Ramirez, who, like you said, was once Miller's lover. And actually, one of the strongest scenes is when Lloyd Bridges' character, Harvey Pell, when he goes and he kind of is grousing to Helen, and Helen like puts him in his place, like he tries to, I don't know, he's more rough than I would definitely I definitely appreciate towards a woman, and she just like slaps him, stops him, basically tell him he's a big man, baby, and
grow up.
Kane's a better man than you, grow up, right? So I thought that was, just like I said, I mean, I was impressed. Probably out of the side characters, Helen Ramirez is my favorite, supporting actor in that film. So okay, so he and Pell get into it because Pell's like just a pissed off man baby, and he gets drunk, and after Amy and Helen talk, then Amy, Helen kind of tells Amy, well, this is my philosophy, and Helen says, but he's your man, so she chides her for not standing by her husband. Right. And then after that, he and Pell get into it at the stables, right? Because Pell's drunk and he's still pissed off at Kane. What'd you think of that? I mean, both of those like confrontations I thought were the only times where you don't see Gary Cooper walking around and asking people to help him are those, that confrontation between Amy and Helen, other than, they pan off sometimes to the Frank Miller's gang. And then the stables, like Pell tries to, I guess Pell's is like, get out of here, Kane. I'm trying to save you. And, they get into a fight.
I don't know. I see that as like foreshadowing Gary Cooper's, Kane's conscience fighting with him. You have one side saying you should run and leave these people. We don't have to do this. But then you have the other side saying, but these are your friends. These are the people you've been with. You married, and you would want someone to protect your family. And I just see that as, an eruption between the two feelings there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's two men. It also reminds me of a football locker room.
So anyway, he does beat Harvey Pell after that, and he knocks a former deputy senseless, and then he writes out his will, and then the clock, ticks towards noon. He goes out and faces Miller and his gang, and they show Amy and Helen ride a wagon to this train station, and Ramirez looks back at Kane while Amy stares ahead, and then Miller steps off the train as the two ladies board, which I thought is an interesting contrast, you know.
Yeah, and what I liked is what she said to his wife was, if that was my man, I would have taken a gun and stood next to him.
Yep.
Basically saying, you took an oath to this man, and at the first sign of trouble, you're running.
Yeah, that's pretty poignant, I think.
Yeah.
And we'll see, because now we get the gunfight. Yeah, it's a
Dun, dun, dun.
dun dun dun. Yeah, it's a great gunfight, and I think the staging of the gunfight is very similar to what you see in later films. I believe Sergio Leone has praised High Noon highly for its use of cinematography and staging during these confrontations. It's like, it's a Kane against the four rough Miller and his gang, and I think they stage it pretty good, and yeah, it's kind of cool. So Kane gets the drop on him, and he kills Ben Miller in the opening salvo, and then Amy hears the gunfire, and what does she do, Amy?
Amy runs back to her husband.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
now she's fearful that he's been shot.
Yeah.
And I think part of the interplay with her was, wow, I just left the man that I love over what? The fact that he's trying to stand up to do the right thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, she's got her own little interplay going on there.
Yeah, so I thought it was a good little fight. There's a little cat and mouse where they chase Kane into a stable, set it on fire, flush him out. And then he kills one other guy, kills Colby. When Colby comes after him in the stable, then he gets flushed out, and then it's him against the last two people, and Pierce and Miller are only the ones left. And then we have, like, I would say that while this is all very exciting, good action, I think what Amy does to me might be like the climax of the movie.
Do we dare share what she does? I mean,
yeah, of course. It's all spoilers, by the way.
It's all spoilers.
I know, so, I say it like 3/4 of the way through the podcast, but
I think we spoiled it in the beginning. But
yeah,
I mean, she's running back to her husband. She gets caught by the big guy, Miller.
No, before that though.
Oh, she grabs a gun.
Yeah, she grabs a gun and she shoots Pierce from behind, leaving only Miller. But then Miller realizes, oh, he's got another ally. So he grabs her, and then it's the face-off, and he has to. Well, the eternal choice in Miller's eyes is he won't shoot me because I'm holding his wife. Whereas in reality, yeah, he probably would. Yeah, maybe if he's a good shot. I mean, you see this trope a lot. Like the bad guy uses a human shield, right? But then Amy, I think that's something cool, is that she kind of scratches the guy's face, and Kane shoots him dead. Miller
ducks away, and Kane kills him.
Yeah.
So in the end, she did grab a pistol and stay with her husband.
Yeah, she came back to help her man. I thought that's pretty neat. So it's cool. So I don't know. I wonder.
Too late.
Yeah. So he helps her to his feet. They embrace. And then, of course, the townspeople come out.
Of course, because now it's safe. But isn't that the way everybody is? I mean, look at today's society. There's so many people that get all over everybody. Oh, you didn't do the right thing. You didn't stand up for that person. But would you do the right thing in a time of need of your community? I don't know. That's a good question that whether people are looking or not. Right. Would you stand up?
Right. Yeah, I guess there's that one show, right? What Would You Do? That I think ABC puts out. Yeah, it's really interesting. But of course, Kane smiles at Johnny, the kid who's going to help him. but he looks angrily at the rest of the crowd, and then he tosses his marshal star in the dirt, and he departs with Amy, his wife, on their wagon. So, and then they finally say the end of the line, and Bill Kane shot Frank Miller dead, right, for the song. So that was kind of cool. I mean, I enjoyed the movie. Again, it's that perfect hour and a half time. Not a lot of filler. I mean, really, I mean, it's pretty tense, and it's it's very moderately paced, in that type of thriller with the gun leading up to the gunfight at the end. So,
Oh, yes. And the ramping up of the music and how loud the music is. And I'd like to point out that I think that they actually put the credits first in movies so that they had time to get their popcorn and get to their seats, because I don't think the popcorn popped that quickly back then, did it?
did they even? I didn't even know if they had popcorn in movies.
I'm sure
Did they have like weird big sandwiches? I don't know.
I don't think they had weird big sandwiches. Um, Definitely, probably not the Coke products and Pepsi products that we have now. But
Right. Yeah.
I mean, no movie's complete without movie popcorn.
I agree.
Extra butter, gotta have it.
Yeah, I'm not a super big popcorn fan. I don't like that, the kernels get in between my teeth, but I cannot say no to a bucket of popcorn while
I
watching a
know.
movie. Or we
That's
pop it,
the
if we're
perfect
watching it
date.
at home. Yeah, if we're watching it at home, then we pop some popcorn, or we have a bag of
Can't
a
say
bag of,
no.
kettle corn, or the flavored popcorn that comes in a bag already popped.
So shout out to whoever's marketing ploy that was to have popcorn at movie
I know
theaters.
that might be a fun little tidbit. Maybe we should research that for our next
our
our
next
next
one.
our
Who
next
started
one.
this?
Yeah, who started the
Or
popcorn?
or if our viewers / listeners know, they should comment and tell us.
Yeah, that'd be kind of neat. So anyway, that is High Noon in a nutshell, and with our commentary as we go. So I guess the big question is, as this is an RPG podcast and YouTube series, what would you use for the
Well,
RPG to run this?
I don't know. I mean, we've thrown some different things out there. We know if we were Jason Connerly, it would be the aces and eights.
Probably be aces and eights. Yeah. I really
But
enjoyed, even though my character got gunned down by the treacherous Hobbs character, not Hobbs himself.
just because you didn't know how it was to be played.
That's
But
fine. But I
I
really
mean,
enjoyed aces and eights. It's great because it has like it's definitely very granular, but it has like a shot clock that you would put on the silhouette of your target and you shoot at it. And I think that's really neat. I think just Boot Hill, classic TSR Boot Hill, would work great for this. I mean, really any Western that you can think of could probably work really
oh yeah.
well. I guess if you want to ground it more in reality, I think like a system like Boot Hill or GURPS Western would be really great. I mean, I guess you could, if you wanted to superhero it, you could use Savage Worlds, and you don't have to throw in the Deadlands weird stuff. If you feel like Bill Kane 1 against 4 is like an ace, um, fighting fighting the bad guys. So you could make it more cinematic. Oh, I get and I think maybe that's what they mean by revisionist Western. Is not like unlimited ammo, and because they do reload their ammo. When he's fighting, he gets
Mhm.
to a place and he has to reload his ammo. He's like, oh man, I'm almost out of ammo, type of thing. So
Oh, definitely. I would even say we've been play testing that new Reaver system. Shout out to Joe Salvador of
yeah.
Raven God Games. I would think even the way he's doing his convention ones
Hmm.
would work with this as well.
Yeah.
Because there it's dice chain, so you have a greater chance if you don't have the skill of failing than you do succeeding, which is pretty realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely more sword and source. The Reaver system, there's a quick start out there. I put the link in the show notes millions of times, but you can look up Reaver quick start and find it on drive through. But yeah, I think it's like sword and sorcery. You characters can become heroic, and definitely Will Kane was heroic. Marshall Will Kane was heroic in this movie. But it has that sense of reality, right? And I believe that you can modernize Reaver to involve like guns and stuff like that, and just figure that out. So that's a great suggestion, Amy.
Well, just another weird idea. What
Mhm.
about the free league system for T2K, Twilight 2000?
Yeah,
Because there you have a moral code, you have buddies that you're trying to protect. It's a pretty deadly game unto itself.
right. Yeah, if you get hit, you're gonna go down, with a hit or two. So yeah, I think that could definitely work as well.
And I do think it has that timing situation in some of the part of the game there. Like if you're staging a battle, you still have other people coming at you, or you have to figure out, a way out, or you have to keep track of your food, your water, your bullets, everything.
Yeah. And I think in this you do have like the coolness under fire mechanic, which is,
Mhm.
and any game that would have that would be kind of neat because like sometimes these guys don't shoot directly at each other. They duck for cover, right? They run for cover or something like that when
Mhm.
they're being shot at. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool. So I think I don't know if we have anything else on this movie. Any last words on High Noon from 1952, Amy?
No, I just think that they should go to Paramount Plus and stream it, give it
Yep.
a chance. I mean, I think you'll fall in love with the movie. And eventually, by the time we're finished reviewing all these movies, you're going to be watching black and white constantly.
Right. But I think we have one more black and white movie, I believe, right? Because then
Uh,
is Liberty Valance black and white?
well, when we watched it, no, it was not. And Who Shot Liberty Valance is our next one.
Right.
Um,
Well,
I
maybe this
think
might be
it
the
could
last black and white. So
possibly,
we'll let you know for
but
next time. I honestly don't recall, and I should. We have watched it recently.
well, we've watched a lot of them, and I think Who Shot Liberty Valance is the last one that you can choose black and white or color with.
Oh, that's curious. Okay.
But I think for the rest of them, they're definitely in color.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you see the difference. You see the difference in the movie, the way it feels, the way the
Mhm.
lighting is, except for like some of the ones that patterned it after High Noon, obviously.
Right.
But I mean that narrowing into the eyes where you
Yes,
can
that's
just
a big one. That's a big one, right? That is definitely that's something we forgot to mention is that when they show the clock, the people in the scene they focus on their faces and their facial expressions. There's a lot of cut-ins, and even when they're in the fight, as they're building up to the fight, when they're running and gunning, not so much, but when they're building up to the fight, you go, to their where they have their gun, where they have, their face, where they have their gun. There's a lot of buildup,
Mhm.
which you see in a lot of later westerns, truth be told.
Oh yeah, I think some of my favorite shots in High Noon is when they're focused on their eyes and you can see the clock in their eyes.
Yeah. Or
I
yeah, they're
think
looking at
that's
the
some of
clock
my
or the clock's in
favorite.
the background. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean it just because you can almost sense that tension and you see some of the sweat on their face and it's perfect. I mean, in my opinion, but
Yeah. Great movie. It got Best Picture for a reason, So
absolutely.
all right. So without further talk, I will cut it off here. But thank you so much, Amy, for joining me to review High Noon.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Yep, me too. It's got John Wayne in it. So looking forward to that. All right.
Hmm.
So without further talk, all we have to say is
Good night and
and
good
good
rolling.
rolling.